And today we're going to look at, drumroll, price anchoring. Part 1. What is price anchoring? Okay, imagine this. You're visiting a city, for example, Rome in Italy, and you're trying to figure out how much a pizza should cost in Rome because you're a tourist and you don't want to be ripped off. You have a friend who was just in Puglia, Italy, and they told you that the pizza over there cost them 20 euros. Now, this number becomes your anchor, and you're going to use that as your starting point on judging how much the pizza in Rome should cost and what is reasonable. So for example, if you go to a restaurant and they tell you that their pizza costs 70 euros, you're going to judge it based on the 20 euros because that's your anchor, and you're going to be like, okay, this is really expensive. If you go to a different restaurant and they tell you that the pizza costs 5 euros, you're going to be like, wow, this is really cheap. If they tell you it's 20 euros, like 22, 25 euros, you're going to be like, okay, it seems to be about the same that my friend paid. So this happens because our brains tend to latch on to the first number or the first piece of information that we get that can act as an anchor, and it helps us make future decisions. Now, the funny thing is that we tend to use our anchors across different categories. So for example, if you go to a restaurant in Rome and you find out that the pizza in Rome is more expensive than the pizza your friend had in Puglia, you might assume that everything in Rome is going to be more expensive. And then, for example, when you go to buy a bottle of water, you would remember that, okay, things in Rome are more expensive, so the water should be more expensive as well. This is basically a process in our brain that helps us categorize and make decisions and understand the world. Okay, now how does price anchoring work in marketing? So it works like this. The consumers are presented with an initial piece of information. This could be a price, but it could also be a quality or a feature of the service or product. And this initial information serves as a reference or as the anchor. Once the anchor is set, what basically happens is then that influences how the consumer judges the following information that they receive during the process of marketing to them. The third step is the impact on decision making. So essentially, consumer psychology always focuses on how we can influence the decision making of a consumer or their purchasing decision making. So what happens with price anchoring is because we influence their judgment, we also influence their decision making with, for example, presenting them with a high price, even if it's not related to the product, can influence the way they will perceive the following price that we give them, even if the following price is still very high for the product that they're actually getting. Because we've anchored them to an even higher price, their judgment will be influenced. Step 4 is that anchoring is very persistent. So even if the consumer understands the anchoring effect and they know that this is exactly what's being done, it acts on a subconscious level. In other words, when we're writing sales pages or crafting offers, we can position our product as really cheap or really expensive by simply anchoring the reader to a higher or to a lower number. And no, you will not always want to go with a higher price anchor because you don't always want to appear as the cheapest option. Sometimes a consumer might want to go for the more expensive option, and that's why you need to understand your target market really well to understand how to serve them and how to present the offer to them in the best way possible. For example, if you're looking for an eye surgeon, you might want to go for the most expensive eye surgeon you can find because that's going to make you trust them more automatically, as opposed to trying to find the cheapest option, which could end up making you blind. Now, if you know me, you know I'm a total geek and I love diving into scientific research, and I've decided to share this gift with you by diving into scientific research behind price anchoring and sharing it with you and simplifying it for you. Now, the reason you want to get familiar with consumer marketing and the reason you want to dive into this research part with me, even if you think it's boring, but I promise you, I'm not going to make it boring, is because that's going to give you a deeper level of understanding of copywriting. And I promise you, even like most copywriting courses don't go that deep into copywriting. They just kind of teach you the surface level stuff, but I'm going to teach you the deep stuff and you get it for free. You're welcome. Okay, so first of all, research tells us that we have internal and external anchors, and we use them both to make judgments. So basically, your internal anchors are preconceptions and experiences that you have from your life up until the point you arrive at the sales page or up until the point you're being presented with an offer. And then the external anchor is the anchor that you experience in that moment from, for example, a sales page, or how you're being marketed to. Or if we flip the table, because we are the marketers in the situation, we are the ones providing external anchors to our customers, but we also have to take into account that our customers come with pre-existing beliefs and experiences. And again, when you're doing customer research, when you're doing your client avatar and market research, you get to understand what kind of anchors your consumer might come with. And they could come from, things that they've tried previously. So for example, if you're selling a fitness program and your program costs $900 and that the competitors normally price their programs at $50, you understand that the moment they arrive at your price, like at your sales page, and they're going to see this, the price point, they're going to be like, what? This is crazy expensive. Because they've been anchored to the $50 price point. Could be also the other way around, and you just have to be aware of it, of what your customer could come with, what kind of pre-existing beliefs they could come with, so that you understand how your external anchors will go with their internal anchors, and whether you should go against the grain or whether it's better to kind of go with what they already have and play on that. And another thing you can ask yourself is, do I need to do some unanchoring for my reader? So if you know that they come with a strong bias, with a strong anchor from somewhere else, you might have to do some heavy lifting to actually transition them from being so tightly anchored to something that they've experienced and move them into a more neutral space, so that then you can anchor them to something different. And sometimes that could take multiple sales letters or multiple exposures. There's a study by Adavo and Wire. I think that's how you pronounce their names. I always find scientists have really weird surnames. Anyway, they found that price anchoring works across different categories. So you can anchor your reader to a price that's unrelated to your product, and they will still use that to judge your product. And you see this a lot in sales letters. Let's say that you're writing a sales page for that fitness program. You could start talking about the cost of healthcare for somebody who gets sick from diabetes, for example. And that big number, your reader would still use that as an anchor. So then, let's say you talk about the cost of medical care, which would be 50, 60, 70,000 a year, and then that number will become the anchor for your reader. And then you could use another number that would, for example, be relating to something completely different. And then eventually when you present them the price of your program, which could, for example, be $500 or $200, all of a sudden that number seems much lower and more reasonable than if you did not have those huge anchors beforehand. And then Wu and colleagues found that repetition makes the anchoring effect stronger. So it might be worth considering how many times, without being too weird, you could insert your price anchors into the sales letter. Now, obviously, the longer the sales letter, the more space you'll have, or the more exposure you have to your customer, the more opportunities you will have. Now, if you have shorter copy, maybe it's not a good idea to use like 20 different price anchors. However, just bear that in mind, that when you repeat the anchor, it strengthens the anchoring effect. And finally, Englich and his colleagues also found that the anchoring effect is so strong that it can influence the judgment of experts in fields like law, for example. And this just shows the pervasive and strong nature of this cognitive bias. So imagine if somebody who's like studied for years and has worked in the field for years can be influenced by the anchoring effect. What does that do for a simple consumer who's just motivated to find a solution to a problem? Okay, that concludes the research section. I'm going to link those papers and some more in the description if you want to geek out and read into the anchoring effect deeper. The resources are there for you. I do encourage you to do that. Now let's dive into some examples together so that you can see how price anchoring is used in marketing in real life. Now, I just want you to know that you see price anchoring everywhere, especially when you see like the common sales tags where something would have been priced as $100 and then that's crossed out and then you've got like $50, because obviously you're going to use that first number. Wow, I just like spat everywhere. You're going to use that first number to anchor you, and then you make your judgment on how good a deal you're getting based off of that. And I also wonder, I'm not sure if it's true, don't quote me on it, but I oftentimes wonder whether shops give you an inflated value just to make the discount seem like it's a bigger discount. But I'm not sure. Don't quote me on it, but I wouldn't be surprised. Okay, so in the first example, you can see that there are a bunch of different numbers just kind of thrown around in the first sentence. You've got like 700,000 paying subscribers, $150 million, $258 million, 200,000, just big numbers, very big numbers. And those all act as anchors, even though some of them are not prices. So that you can imagine as the person goes down and actually scrolls down to the price, which could be like $50, $100 or whatever, because they've been anchored to these huge numbers, all of a sudden this $50 is not going to be a big shocker. It's just going to be like, oh, it's just $50. What is $50 in comparison to $258 million? Nothing. The next example is you've got the $59.99 crossed out. You've also got 90%, and the actual price is $5.99. So you see someone was anchored to $59.99, even to the 90, and then when they're actually shown the price of $5.99, it just doesn't seem like a lot next to those numbers. Then here we have a very audacious example where TidyCal is comparing themselves to their direct competitor, which is Calendly, and they're just putting the two prices side by side, and they're like, hey, for Calendly, you end up paying about $144. With us, you're only going to pay $29. So not only are they actually comparing themselves to a well-known brand, they're actually comparing the prices side by side, and they're doing some solid price anchoring because there is a huge difference. So $29 in comparison to $144. It just seems like pocket money at this point. And then the last example is a very common one that you're going to see in pretty much every single sales page, where you have a list of different things that are included in the service or the offer, and each one is assigned a value, and then it's all added up to a number that is basically much bigger than the actual price of the offer. So that does two things. It illustrates the total value a customer is getting, but it's also anchoring them to a higher number so that then they're revealed a lower number. That obviously seems like a good deal. Now, obviously with this sales page, I would just say that it would have done much better if each one of those prices was much higher than the actual price of the offer. because right now like 47 and 37 is very close, so you're anchoring them to like $47, and then 37 doesn't seem like such a huge difference. However, if each one of those things was much higher than the 37, and then the total value was even higher, then the $37 would just seem like pennies. But at this point, it's like someone is anchored. At this point, like they're being anchored to smaller prices, and there's not such a huge difference between 37 and 47, or even there are things included that are 27, which is lower than the 37. So then the anchoring could potentially be confusing. But if I would always recommend, if you're doing this, make sure that the values are much higher than the actual price of the offer. Okay, so now let's move on to the practice section where you get to practice what you just learned. So just as a very quick summary, price anchoring is all about placing an external anchor in the sales letter or in the hopes of influencing the consumer's judgment so that your offer basically is more appealing. Now, I want you to practice writing bits of copy using price anchoring. So the first practice that you're going to do is you're going to write some sales copy where you're going to anchor your reader to a higher number, so that when you present them with your offer, the number or the value that they're getting, the price that they're buying it at, seems like a very reasonable price. And then I want you to do the opposite, where you're going to present your product or service as a very high value service, and you're going to anchor your reader to a lower price first, and then you're going to show them the real price, which is going to be much higher. And the whole idea, this one is going to be much harder because you're gonna have to tell them why it's worth the high price point at the same time. And then you're going to choose one of the two pieces of copy, and you're going to extend it to include repetition of your price anchoring to make the effect stronger. And then also, as you're doing those tasks, I want you to think about unrelated anchors that you could include in your copy. So the longer copy that you're going to write, you can think about how you could write the story so that you would have more opportunities to include anchors from different categories that would still act in your favor. Have fun writing. I hope you enjoyed diving into this copywriting concept. If you did, please let me know in the comments below. Like this video, subscribe to my channel, and you can sign up to my email list and follow me on TikTok, Instagram, OnlyFans, and everywhere else. See you in the next one.